It was a Monday morning in Washington, D.C., but the atmosphere at the Capitol was far from ordinary. The political world was buzzing about the upcoming nationally televised debate titled America at a Crossroads, the future of freedom and responsibility. Sponsored by a major news network and aired live across all major channels. It promised to be the most anticipated debate in recent memory. At the heart of the buzz were two political titans representing polar ends of the American ideological spectrum, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, the staunch conservative firebrand, and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, the progressive icon known simply as AOC. From the moment the debate was announced, Americans everywhere circled the date on their calendars. It wasn't just another policy talk. It was being hyped as a cultural clash, a showdown between tradition and revolution, capitalism and socialism, Texas and the Bronx. Millions tuned in. Social media exploded. Memes, predictions, and satirical videos flooded the internet. Everyone had a stake in it. Conservatives saw it as a chance to reclaim the narrative. Progressives saw it as an opportunity to push bold ideas to the mainstream. Ted Cruz, wearing a sharp navy suit and his signature smirk, entered the studio confidently, flanked by aides and well-wishers. He had done his homework and was ready to fire on all cylinders. His team had combed through AOC's speeches, tweets, and voting history like detectives hunting for clues. Across the room, AOC exuded her typical confident charm. Dressed in a red blazer, with her hair tied neatly, she walked in with a calm demeanor and an unmistakable energy. Her supporters were pumped. "She's going to own Cruz," one aide whispered. The moderators took their seats. The cameras rolled. The lights came on. America held its breath. The first question was about the economy. "Senator Cruz," the moderator began, "do you believe the American economic system needs fundamental reform?" Cruz leaned in, his voice calm but firm. "I believe in the American dream, a dream fueled by hard work, not handouts. The problem isn't capitalism. The problem is a bloated government, fueled by people like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, who think the answer to every problem is more government and more spending." OC smiled as the camera turned to her. "Let me just say," she began, "when millions of Americans are working 60 hours a week and still can't afford rent, healthcare, or education, maybe it's not just handouts. Maybe it's a broken system that works for the wealthy and leaves everyone else behind. What Senator Cruz calls handouts, I call dignity." The audience clapped, but Cruz wasn't fazed. "Well, Congresswoman," he replied, "I'm not sure how giving government bureaucrats more control over people's lives equals dignity. You speak of working-class struggles, yet push for Green New Deal policies that would kill jobs in my home state. Texans can't pay their bills with climate slogans." AOC's eyes narrowed. "What kills jobs, Senator, is ignoring science. What kills jobs is pretending oil is infinite and ignoring the new economy, green energy, clean technology, and jobs that won't poison our air and water." That's when Cruz struck. "Speaking of science," he said, turning toward her with that classic Cruz bite, "it's rich hearing lectures from someone who tweeted that the world would end in 12 years unless we act. By that logic, we should all be underwater by now. But here we are, in suits, under studio lights, still above sea level." Laughter erupted in the audience. Even the moderator raised an eyebrow. AOC didn't flinch. "I was using hyperbole to highlight urgency, something your side consistently mocks instead of addressing. But let's be real here, Senator. You're a Harvard-educated lawyer who ran away to Cancun during a Texas crisis. Spare me the lectures on leadership." The tension thickened. The moderator cut in. "Let's stay on topic. Moving to healthcare." But the room already knew this wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a battle of ideologies, and the gloves were off. The moderator leaned forward, clearing his throat to regain control of the heated stage. "Next question. Healthcare remains a deeply divisive issue. Should the government guarantee universal healthcare to all Americans?" Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, we'll start with you. AOC nodded, composed but fiery. "Absolutely. Healthcare is not a privilege for the wealthy, it's a basic human right. No American should have to choose between insulin and rent. My support for Medicare for all comes from a simple principle: people's lives matter more than profits." A wave of applause rolled through the studio. On social media, #HealthcareIsARight started trending immediately. But Cruz, never one to let an opportunity pass, pounced. Congresswoman, your plan would cost trillions of dollars. It would bankrupt this nation and destroy the private healthcare system that millions of Americans currently rely on. Let's not pretend we can wave a magic wand and cover everyone without a massive tax hike. AOC leaned into the mic, smirking. Senator Cruz, I don't think you're in a position to lecture anyone about fiscal responsibility. You supported a $1.9 trillion tax cut that overwhelmingly benefited billionaires and corporations. Where was your budget anxiety then? Cruz shot back, I supported letting Americans keep more of their own money. What you're proposing is taking that money and handing it to unelected bureaucrats who'll decide whether grandma gets her hip surgery. That's not freedom, that's socialism. The crowd murmured at the word socialism. AOC didn't miss a beat. You love to throw that word around, Senator, but let's talk facts. Every major developed country, from Canada to Germany, has some form of universal healthcare. Are they all socialist hellholes? Or are they simply more humane than a system where people die from rationing private rationing? Cruz raised his hand slightly as if offering a counterpoint in court. But in those countries you wait for care. I've spoken with Canadians who come to the US for surgery because their government health care couldn't see them for 6 months. That's the system you want? Bureaucrats deciding your fate based on a flowchart. AOC, clearly prepared, retorted, and how many Americans delay care because they can't afford it at all? That's not a delay, that's a death sentence. You say socialism like it's a bad word. I say compassion is patriotic. The audience clapped again, this time louder, more energized. Ted Cruz adjusted his tie and shifted in his chair. He knew the next move had to be surgical. Congresswoman, he said calmly, you speak eloquently about compassion. But what about the costs? What about the debt? Do you tell your constituents that we'll need a 70% tax rate? Or that small businesses will drown under mandates they can't afford? AOC smiled coldly. Funny you should mention small businesses, Senator. You voted repeatedly against minimum wage increases and for corporate loopholes. Your support for small businesses seems to end when it's time to actually help them. Cruz chuckled. What helps small businesses is getting the government out of the way, not drowning them in red tape, climate mandates, and feel-good slogans that sound nice but crash economies. Then came the moment that sent shockwaves across America. Senator Cruz, AOC said, holding up a printed graph. This is a chart from the Congressional Budget Office. It shows that the long-term savings of Medicare for all exceed its costs. We're already spending more per capita than any other country. We're just getting less for it. Cruz raised his eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. He took the paper, glanced at it, and said, So you trust government projections now? Interesting. Boom. Clean deflection. The crowd's energy surged again. The moderator tried once more to rein things in. Let's turn to climate change. But the two weren't done. Not even close. For millions watching at home, it was the first time they'd ever seen a political debate feel more like a championship fight. And though no one had landed the knockout yet, the punches were flying faster and harder with every topic. Red states cheered Cruz's defense of liberty. Blue states praised AOC's passionate push for justice. But one thing was certain, America was watching and choosing sides. The moderator cleared his throat again, visibly trying to maintain order as the debate continued. The tension in the room was palpable. This was no longer a typical political discussion. This was a battle of values, of worldviews, and every word had the potential to shift the tides. The topic shifted to immigration, and the questions came fast. Senator Cruz, your party has been vocal about securing the southern border. What are your thoughts on the current immigration policy, and how would you reform it? Cruz sat up straight, his voice firm. America is a nation of laws. We welcome immigrants, legal immigrants who come here to contribute and uphold the values that make America great. The border crisis is a direct result of lax policies and open borders. What we need is stronger security, a wall where it's necessary, and a pathway to citizenship that doesn't reward illegal behavior. The crowd erupted into applause from conservative quarters. AOC's turn. She responded almost immediately, her tone unwavering. Senator Cruz, what you call stronger security is code for separating families, detaining children in cages, and dehumanizing people who are fleeing violence and poverty. We need comprehensive immigration reform that treats people with dignity. The current system is broken, and it's time for a change that reflects our core values. She paused, giving Cruz a pointed glance. What's more un-American than turning away people who need help? What's more un-American than criminalizing people for seeking a better life? The audience responded, but it wasn't the same partisan division anymore. Even Cruz supporters couldn't ignore the emotional weight of her words. The contrast was striking: Cruz's rhetoric about the law and order, AOC's impassioned defense of compassion. Cruz wasn't one to back down easily, though. "Congresswoman," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "with all due respect, you're not the one living in a border town. You don't understand the impact of illegal immigration on real families. You haven't seen how it drives up crime and puts strain on local schools and hospitals. I've seen it in Texas, and let me tell you, the people there want security and accountability, not blanket amnesty." AOC leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Senator, the idea that immigrants are responsible for crime is a false narrative that you and your party love to spread. It's not immigrants who are the problem, it's an outdated system that fails to provide opportunities for people once they get here. I've been to those border towns too, and I've seen the true face of America, people, human beings who want a shot at a better life." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "If you're really interested in securing the border, let's start with stopping the illegal weapons trade, the real criminals who are smuggling violence into this country, not families looking for safety." Cruz's face reddened, his fingers tapping nervously on the podium. "Your utopian ideas sound great in theory, but they don't work in practice. The left wants to pretend that we can just open our doors and let everyone in, but that's not how the real world works. You can't just give away free healthcare, free education, and free everything to everyone who crosses the border. Where does it stop, Congresswoman?" AOC didn't miss a beat. "It stops when we stop treating people like criminals just because they want to build a better life. It stops when we stop criminalizing poverty. And it stops when we acknowledge that the system is broken, and that includes the corporate greed that drives this entire debate." The debate had reached a boiling point, but it wasn't just about policies anymore, it was a battle for hearts and minds. America was split into two factions, one that saw the future through the lens of law, order, and limited government, and the other that envisioned a more inclusive future, focused on compassion, fairness, and equality. The divide was clear, and it wasn't just political. It was cultural. Cruz glanced at AOC, his eyes narrowing. "You know, Congresswoman, you keep pushing this humanity over law narrative. But I'll tell you this, if you let your emotions drive the train, you'll be surprised when it crashes. Because laws exist for a reason. They keep us safe. They keep us secure. And your fantasy world of open borders? It's a disaster waiting to happen." AOC's response was calm, almost too calm, like a calculated move before the storm. "Senator, I'd rather live in a world where we err on the side of compassion than one where we tear families apart because of outdated political ideologies. You can talk about safety, but I want to talk about justice. I want to talk about humanity." The room was silent for a moment. The clash of values couldn't have been clearer. The audience seemed torn, unsure of how to respond as both candidates held their ground. But then Cruz delivered his final blow. "It's funny, Congresswoman, that you talk about humanity, but your party's policies are the very ones that are costing American citizens their jobs, their healthcare, and their safety. You say you want to protect people, but you've sold out to radical ideas that would make our nation unrecognizable. And let's not forget, you voted for policies that defund our police and demonize those who keep us safe. That's your idea of compassion?" AOC's face hardened. "And let's not forget, Senator Cruz, that your vision of America is one where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. You want to protect the status quo while claiming to be the champion of freedom. But the truth is, you're just defending the interests of the corporations who keep you in power. That is the real betrayal." The audience sat in stunned silence. The debate now having reached a fever pitch. The stage was set for one final clash. One final question that would either end this battle with a bang or leave it hanging in the air like an unresolved cliffhanger. The moderator took a deep breath, clearly sensing the intensity of the moment. His voice was measured, but everyone in the studio could feel the palpable tension in the air. "This is it. We're coming to the final question. This will be your chance to directly address the American people. So, I ask you both, what kind of America do you envision for the future, and how would you get there?" Cruz and AOC exchanged a brief glance. This was the moment they'd both been waiting for, the closing argument, the last opportunity to make their case to the millions watching from across the country. This wasn't just about policies anymore, it was about framing the future. Cruz spoke first, his voice authoritative and calm, though his eyes still burned with intensity. "America was built on the principles of liberty, individual freedom, and personal responsibility. We are a nation where anyone, regardless of their background, can achieve greatness if they work hard enough. My vision is one of a country where we respect the Constitution, uphold the rule of law, and ensure that everyone has the opportunity to succeed. But success comes with responsibility. We must ensure that the government does not overreach, that businesses are free to innovate, and that the American dream is within reach for all. We must secure our borders, strengthen our military, and make sure that we are safe from those who wish us harm. He paused, letting the words settle before continuing. A future like this isn't built on empty promises or radical ideas. It's built on hard work, respect for tradition, and a commitment to protecting the freedoms that have made this country the greatest in the world. Cruz's words echoed across the room, the audience applauding his message of self-reliance, security, and freedom. There was a sense of pride in his voice, a belief in the greatness of America as it was and could be again. Now it was AOC's turn. She didn't rush her words. She stood, her posture firm, eyes locked on Cruz for a moment before turning toward the audience. My vision for America is one where we don't just survive, we thrive. We have an opportunity to build a country that is truly just, one where everyone has access to healthcare, where no one has to choose between a roof over their head and putting food on the table, and where we address the existential threats to our planet with urgency and compassion. It's an America that understands that our diversity is our strength and that each of us deserves dignity, opportunity, and a fair shot at success. Her voice began to rise with passion. We are at a crossroads, and it's time to decide what kind of future we want. Do we continue down the path of inequality, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, where climate change ravages our communities and where people are separated from their families and forced into poverty because of systemic issues? Or do we step forward together and build a nation that works for everyone? She stepped closer to the podium, her eyes never leaving Cruz. We can create a future where we invest in each other. We can create an economy that lifts everyone up, not just the top 1%. We can have a healthcare system that covers everyone, a Green New Deal that creates millions of jobs, and an immigration system that values people over politics. AOC's words were bold, full of vision and hope. The studio audience responded with a loud, enthusiastic applause, a stark contrast to the controlled reactions Cruz had received. Her message resonated with those yearning for change, for a new vision of what America could be. For a moment, the room felt like it was suspended in time. Two opposing forces had collided on that stage, and the stakes were higher than ever. Cruz responded quickly, the final word in the debate. Congresswoman, your vision sounds appealing, but it's fundamentally flawed. You want to upend the system that's worked for millions of Americans and replace it with a socialist agenda that will bankrupt this nation. You want to raise taxes, defund police, and give away everything for free. But that's not what Americans want. They want freedom. They want opportunity. They want the chance to succeed on their own terms. And I will fight to protect that future, one where individual liberty is upheld, where businesses can thrive, and where America remains the beacon of hope for the world. AOC smiled slightly, but her voice was calm. Senator, you can call it whatever you like. But what I'm fighting for is a future where everyone has access to the basics of life. It's not about socialism, it's about humanity. We've seen what happens when we cater to the richest among us, and it's time for a change. The camera zoomed in on the two politicians, their final words hanging in the air, echoing across the nation. The stage had been set for the next battle, not just on this debate stage, but in the halls of Congress, in every state, in every home. This was bigger than politics. It was a clash of visions for the future of America. The debate had ended, but the real fight was just beginning. The debate was over, but the effects were far from it. The cameras cut to the audience, and the moderator quickly thanked both Cruz and AOC for their participation before signaling the end of the live broadcast. But the crowd remained restless, a mixture of cheers and jeers filling the room. The energy was electric. This had been a debate for the ages, and everyone knew it. As the cameras switched to the analysts, the political pundits couldn't contain their excitement. The controversy was just beginning to unfold across social media, news networks, and dinner tables across America. Senator Cruz delivered a solid, traditional conservative defense of America's values, one commentator said, adjusting his glasses. His argument for strong borders, fiscal responsibility, and law and order struck a chord with the millions who feel that the country is becoming too soft. His passion for protecting the status quo and pushing back on socialism was clear. Another analyst, a left-wing pundit, disagreed sharply. I think AOC absolutely dominated that stage. She made a compelling case for the future of America, a future built on compassion, inclusivity, and sustainability. She didn't shy away from calling out Cruz's failed policies and painted a clear picture of a more just and equal society. What Cruz and his supporters failed to understand is that the old ways simply don't work anymore. We need bold change. As the debate had raged on, it had turned into much more than just a clash between two politicians. It had become a symbol of the greater cultural divide in the nation. Cruz embodied the vision of America as a land of personal responsibility, individual freedom, and limited government. AOC, on the other hand, represented a new generation of leadership that sought to reimagine the country's future with an emphasis on collective progress, fairness, and addressing systemic inequality. The online world was no different. Social media exploded with hashtags like #CruzDestroyed, #AOCForPresident, and #DebateOfTheCentury. Videos from the debate went viral, clips of Cruz's sharp jabs at AOC's policies, juxtaposed with moments where AOC stood firm, challenging Cruz's conservative views with a righteous conviction that captured the hearts of millions. The post-debate polls had started rolling in just an hour after the live broadcast. A whopping 65% of respondents in major urban centers, many of them younger voters, expressed support for AOC, praising her bold ideas and fresh approach to old problems. In contrast, Cruz found his supporters doubling down on his defense of traditional values and his portrayal of AOC's ideas as dangerous and naive. To them, Cruz had stood firm against the tide of socialism. Meanwhile, AOC became a symbol of hope for progressives, a lightning rod for young people and minorities who felt that the country had lost its way under the weight of systemic injustice. Her words were not just those of a politician, but of a leader who was ready to tear down the walls of inequality that divided the nation. Months later, as the campaign trail for the next presidential election began to heat up, Cruz and AOC continued their battle. They were no longer just political figures, they were representatives of two entirely different visions for the future of America. They became symbols of resistance to each other, each pushing for a version of America that they believed in with their very being. The question remained, who would win in the end? Would America embrace Cruz's version of a strong, secure, and self-reliant nation, or would AOC's vision of an inclusive, compassionate, and just society take hold? As the political gears ground forward, the ultimate answer lay not in one debate, but in the hearts and minds of millions of Americans. And only time would tell how this battle would unfold. But for now, one thing was certain, the debate had changed everything.